Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. Today's subject is Al Wallace, 40 years in sportscasting, 33 of them in Kansas City, and now a published author as well. Al Wallace has been a familiar face for decades on Kansas City television, bringing us the sporting news from baseball, football, college, and back in the day, high school as well. A military brat raised all over the world. Much of his formative time spent in Texas, including the start of his career, which eventually and quickly moved to Kansas City. A love story of broadcasting, as he'll tell you, the author of One for the Coyotes, an autobiography out just this year, and he'll be doing book signings around town as well. Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. A delightful conversation with Al Wallace, next. We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is Where Integrity Matters. Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Sumner One is the company to make your office maximize efficiency. Their family of companies make up one of the largest independent dealers of office technology in the Midwest. They are proud to bring the best service and technology to top companies across the region. Sumner One can help your organization run more smoothly than ever. Sumner One printers, copiers, MFPs, managed print services, document management, infrastructure design, IT services, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Welcome to the one place where everything works. For more information, call Carl Little at 913-752-2256. Get a refreshing change of your expectations of a sports bar and restaurant at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. Matt Llewellyn's welcoming spot at Clinton Parkway in Cassold covers all the bases, like their own handcrafted beers and all the televisions you need for great sports viewing. But it's the large, varied, and delicious menu that stands apart. From a favorite of mine like the awesome ahi tuna appetizer to great sandwiches, outstanding pizza, and truly fantastic entrees, the 23rd Street Brewery has it all. Matt and his friendly staff make it that much more enjoyable. Food until 10, fun until late. The 23rd Street Brewery is a can't-miss stop when you are in Lawrence. What a pleasure on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing, to be joined by Al Wallace, who last year concluded 40 years of television broadcasting, at least for the time being. I've heard little secrets out there. I don't know what's going on, but 33 with WDAF Television, Fox 4, and its later incarnations. And Al's written a new book as well, One for the Coyotes. And if you're wondering why it's coyotes, not coyotes, we'll probably get into that. It's just a regional pronunciation, and there's a good story behind that as well. We'll get into that. But on Kansas City Profiles, the purpose is really to take familiar people whose work you know and face you know or voice you know and give you background that you don't know and inspirations and stories that you have never heard about these particular people and give you further insight to what makes them tick. And Al, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us here.
It's my pleasure to be away from a world where things tend to get condensed to a soundbite. And that's not the case here because we're able to talk long form. I'd much rather do this. So it's my pleasure.
Let's start at the beginning. You were a military brat, lived in very many places around the country. Fort Walters, Texas was the first stop. So generally in the military, these are 2 or 3 year type of things generally for a person. We'll go through this chronology a little bit, but in general, Is that a difficult way to grow up, would you say?
I would say it's a unique way to grow up, especially if you want to compare it, Danny, to anything we see today. I mean, how many kids or how many young people do we talk to today that say they grew up in a military family? It's just not as commonplace, if that makes any sense. You just don't hear about it all that much. But back when you and I were growing up, and I have a roundabout idea about how old you are.
Right.
But, I was born in 1957, which now makes me 61 years old in July of 2019. And so I grew up on a military base for most of my life. My dad retired in 72. I say most of my life, most of my childhood years. My dad retired in 1972. For my first 15 years, I was a military kid. I grew up not just being a military kid, but we lived across the country. We lived in Germany, so I can say I lived, quote unquote, around the world. But as much as anything else, I grew up with the discipline of the military, and that was instilled into all of my brothers and sisters and myself. 4 sisters, 3 brothers, 8 kids, never had more than 3 bedrooms. For a long time, just 1 bathroom, things like that.
Right.
Today that, we would find unique or different.
I'm from a large family as well. I have 5 siblings. I'm the oldest also. And people think it's crazy. Now, I lived in a cul-de-sac that had Jewish families, had 2 kids, and Catholic families, and we had the least, 6.
Right.
But you do just kind of get used to the mayhem, don't you?
I don't. I would define it differently. Used to the mayhem. You were always part of it, so I didn't know anything different.
Right.
So I'd see families with 1 or 2 kids, or tops 3, and I didn't judge them. I didn't know what they went through. I just knew what I went through. I always shared a bedroom with at least 2 brothers,
right,
and at one time 3 brothers. So it was just the 4 of us. We had bunk beds. There were 2 to a bed, and that's the way that went.
That sounds very military.
Yes, and in fact, there was times when I'm growing up. I'm 5, 6. 10 years old, my friends would knock on the door. My true name, my full name is Alva. Right. And I didn't adopt Al until I went into television and I was on air. But a lot of friends here still call me Alva. Todd Lebo calls me Alva. But my friends would knock on the door and say, "Can Alva come out and play?" They would say, "Has Alva done all of his duties? Has he passed inspection?" And I'm not joking. That's what they would say. Is he done with all of his work? Is he done with his responsibilities? Is he freed up to come out and play? That's back when kids would go outside and play,
right,
and wouldn't necessarily spend all day on a tablet or something.
How would you characterize your staff sergeant dad as a father? I know I had a very close friend in college who was a military son. His father was a colonel. He did not call him dad. He called him colonel, which I always found a little odd. But that's that. How would you characterize your dad and your relationship with him?
In connection to you and your friend, I had a friend, John Arthur, who was my best friend from junior high through high school. We even roomed together in college, our first year at Texas Tech. But I would call his father Colonel Arthur. That's what you called him,
right?
Or the Colonel. But my dad, I just called Dad.
Right.
He didn't command or ask that we call him anything else. But all my friends or my friends' parents called him Sergeant Wallace.
Right.
So there was that level of respect for the military and what my dad represented. I grew up in a family, and because we did live from Army base to Army base, and at one point in time from the United States to Germany for 3 years and then back. But especially when we lived in Germany from the time I was 7 to the time I was 10, my dad always said the only colors we are concerned about are red, white, and blue. You're either an American or you're not. And he said that in reference to living in Germany because
right.
This was just 20 years after World War II. And so there was a distinct difference in being an American and being a German. We weren't allowed to leave the base.
Right.
I went 3 years, and I never got more than 17 miles from home. When I was working at Fox 4 here in Kansas City, I'd drive 17 miles to work every day. And but that just never happened when I was a kid. Now, it did happen once, and maybe I'll give you that example before we're done with this podcast. I did leave the base once, but and that's in the book, one for the Coyotes. I described that one incident, and I didn't get in trouble or anything, but it was obviously still in my mind today. But there was that kind of discipline that I grew up with and around.
Was your dad stern? Did you have a warm relationship with him eventually or then?
Oh, absolutely. My dad was stern. He was strict. We didn't, we didn't get beat. We got he got the belt out. That was nothing. That was commonplace.
Right.
That was punishment. And I don't know of any time where it wasn't deserved.
Right.
That's just the way it was. I can't look back and say that it was never cruel. I don't remember one time where I got whipped or handled with a belt where my dad didn't later sit me down, tell me why, explain why, and tell me that he loved me every single time. Right. Every single time. And the thing with my dad, especially when I got older, let's say junior high, 12, and there's still these, household full of kids. I was third from the youngest.
Okay, I think I said you were the oldest. That's right.
But, the thing with my dad was he was so strict that his, how shall I put this? His dominion over the family, if you didn't do something right or do what you were told, it would eventually filter not just towards you but towards the rest of the family. He'd take out his wrath on everyone. So I never knew a time, Danny, when my dad didn't get off work at 5 o'clock where he wasn't home by 5:15. It wasn't where's Dad? 7 o'clock, and nobody knew or cared. No, he was home at 5:15. He was a great father. I had a great dad. And he was responsible for feeding his family and putting a roof over their home. And he lived and died that he did that every day. I never had a doubt, where's Dad? What's he doing? And, my mom was a stay-home mom. She had kids to raise. But if you knew Dad was going to be home at 5:15 and you had a chore to do while he was at work and you didn't have it done by 5:15, the rest of the other 7 kids were on you. You knew what the deadline was.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. So you had the responsibility to them as well as
Absolutely.
to yourself and your dad.
And they had the responsibility to me. And that's where a lot of teamwork comes. Hey, look, if I don't make this block or if I don't make this free throw or if I don't do this, my team suffers. So that makes you away from the game have to learn the discipline of the game. So I grew up with that kind of discipline. I was not only letting myself down, I was letting my brothers and sisters down. And at times, they would come down on me just as hard as Dad.
Right. Oftentimes when you have a strict dad and a stern father, however, and a good relationship, obviously, as you said, the mother is the sounding board, the person you go to for sympathy, whatever. Mm-hmm. What was your relationship with your mom like? Even
better. You use a perfect word for my mom, sympathy, because we could go to her and complain about him. Now, sometimes as a kid, you think the discipline your dad is giving you is too strict. And you could always go to Mom because she had that level ear. She understood where he was coming from, but she was more sympathetic. My dad was military. He spent one tour in Korea, 2 tours of Vietnam. So while I was growing up, I went 2 years without my dad, but it wasn't because he was just, running the streets or I didn't know where he was. He was out serving his country. And there was always my mom. It's just, earlier this month, it was 26 years since she passed away of cancer. And talking to my brother about this last week because that was the anniversary. But, my mom was my dad was a solid A. My dad was a solid A. My mom was an A+.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Did your dad I've been around people who have had a military background and have served in war who